Hello everyone and welcome back to the Ryan Retro channel. In today's video, I'm going to be reviewing the Retroid Pocket G2, a handheld that is excellent, but quite tricky to recommend. The unboxing experience of the Retroid Pocket G2 is basically like any other Retroid device. You get this very simplistic packaging with Retroid Pocket on the top. You have the specific name of the model on the side here, which opens with a nice, satisfying magnetic closure. It's really satisfying to just let this pop back into place. So as we open up the box, we are presented with our quality assurance accepted message, which for me always goes straight in the bin. The user manual, which you shouldn't really need to use when there are fantastic YouTube channels to explain these things, like Ryan Retro, for example. We then get this little enticing peek into the handheld that we bought, and when we take off the protective cover at the top, here is the handheld in all its glory. Slipping it out of the bag, there it is, and what a beautiful color this one is. You do also get a USB-A to C cable at the bottom as well, although I already have about 1 billion of these. That's also not going to be put to much use. The handheld itself is almost identical to the Retroid Pocket 5, which I've covered about 100 times on this channel already. That's not even exaggerating. I think I have made about 100 videos of this beauty. The only real difference is the color, although this is available in this same black color if you'd like to make it look exactly the same as this. It's a design that has been lauded by loads of people as being absolutely fantastic, sleek and sexy, straight to the point, and I don't think you need to fix something if it's not broken. So picking it up, taking it into the hands, it is a pretty comfortable device. It's definitely going to impress people with its all-glass front panel, and the ergonomic bumps on the side definitely do make it a little bit more comfortable, although they're still quite shallow. If I wrap my hand around this in what would be the most comfortable position, and I'll move my index finger to give you a sneak peek, there is actually some space there, as you can see, between the handheld and my fingers. I would like this to be a bit chunkier and fill up that space, like how a real gamepad controller would, and something beefier like a Steam Deck can too. That gap between my finger and the back of the handheld does make it less comfortable, and there's not really any way I could squish my fingers right up to those little ergonomic bumps and hold it in a comfortable way. So unfortunately we are sacrificing a little bit of comfort here in order to make this very thin, slim and sleek and able to be slipped into a pocket like the name on the back. When it comes to the size and the weight, I will overlay these somewhere on the screen, but to put them into real life terms, the weight is similar to my phone. It's also similar in length to a long phone, just jutting out a little bit more because of those built-in controls, and it's about as thick as 2 chocolate advent calendars. So let's take a little tour around the device now and look at the hardware included in this baby. We have the SD card slot, which on mine is actually a little bit crooked. You can see here how it juts out a little bit from the edge of the device, which has been slightly driving me crazy. It pops out nice and easily to reveal the SD card inside. This doesn't come with an SD card or any games, you're going to have to supply your own. And I guess I'm going to have to slice away at this somewhere to make it sit nice and flush. I do think this is very unlikely to happen to you, and it's just my own bad luck. Next to it is a very welcome headphone jack for people who want to listen to wired headphones, and the USB-C port, which is used for charging and video output. We'll cover that more later in the video. On the back we have some nice vents to expel all the hot air that's going to be built up inside this, and spoiler, there is a lot of hot air built up inside this unit, which again we'll get to later in the video. And we have those nice textured ergonomic bumps, which don't actually do much in all honesty, but it's better than nothing. On the top of the device we have the volume buttons and the power button, and here on the front we have 2 front-firing speakers which we will test soon. But let's now get into the actual inputs, the actual buttons you're going to use when you're gaming. Over on the left side we have the D-pad in the top position, and with a small handheld like this, whatever is on the top position is going to be the most comfortable, because you're going to be able to rest your thumbs on it nicely without needing to bend them right down like this. So if you're somebody primarily looking to play D-pad oriented games, you're going to want to get a device like this with the D-pad on top, so you can nicely rest your thumb on it without needing to bend it down like this, or control the game with the middle of your thumb like an animal. The D-pad is the same one that's been used in lots of Retroid and AYN devices. It's really nice. I'm not much of a D-pad gamer, but I think this is a very nice D-pad. It's clicky, it rocks around in a circular motion very fluidly. I think it's a nice D-pad. The A, B, X and Y buttons are also those same Retroid buttons we've seen a lot before that are nice, a little bit hard and very clacky. One of the downsides to Retroid devices are these face buttons are very loud. When you compare them to almost anything else, they are much noticeably louder. Just as a quick example, here is my decibel meter showing the volume. Right now I'm speaking at around 74 decibels. I'll hold up the Retroid Pocket G2 and press the face buttons. And they're about 62 decibels compared with the Steam Deck, which are much quieter at around 42 decibels, and then a dedicated controller, which are around 38 decibels. So these buttons are much louder than others, and it's something to think about if you're maybe going to play this at nighttime when people are sleeping. There's not really any way you can get around that loud clack, even if you press lightly. The analog sticks here I think are lovely. They are Hall effect analog sticks, meaning they use magnets instead of whatever weird things the Nintendo Switch was using that was creating drift issues. So they should be able to last a really long time without any problems. And I've been using the analog sticks a lot on my Retroid Pocket 5 for the past year, and they are still just as fantastic as day one. Absolutely lovely analog sticks. The select and start buttons are super clacky and clicky, but these are ones you're not really going to press very often, so I don't really mind the clickiness of these. And I even, in fact, quite like the clickiness of these because it feels very deliberate when you press them. So if you're trying to bring up the settings in a game or something like that, I like that deliberate click. Down below we have the home button and the back button in Android, which are basically the same as the start and select buttons. Nice little clicky buttons that feel very deliberate. Up at the top we have the left and right shoulder buttons, which are also clicky. Most handhelds do have clicky shoulder buttons, but I prefer ones that don't make the sound. But in the games I play, I actually don't use these buttons very often anyway. I usually use the triggers, and these are lovely triggers. They have a really nice amount of travel there. Analog triggers, which means you can adjust the acceleration of a car or whatever else you may be using them for in a game. They are really lovely. I'm a big fan of these analog triggers. So overall, I would say the controls are very nice. The only things that I don't like personally is how noisy these face buttons are, which I know has driven many people to do mods on their Retroid Pocket 5, which you could do on this as well, as they share the same components, but more on that later. And I would prefer the left analog stick to be at the top instead of the D-pad. But again, we'll get into that later when I talk about alternatives and recommendations. So let's now turn on the screen, which is the highlight piece of the hardware of this device. The screen here is absolutely gorgeous. The OLED panels they use on Retroid devices are just incredible. They're so rich, vibrant, they're OLED, so blacks are true black, giving an incredible amount of contrast. They are just a sight to behold, and really make the device feel more expensive than it is. So as you watch the rest of this review, check out how amazing the screen looks in a multitude of different games. It just looks fantastic no matter what you're doing with this thing. The upcoming Retroid Pocket 6 for a very similar price will also have a 1080p OLED, but be 120Hz. And that's probably the biggest thing setting it apart from this. So if you are potentially going to buy one of these, you do need to think about the Retroid Pocket 6, which I'm going to continue referring to in this video, and I will talk about in more detail at the end of the video as well. So let's now see how those front-firing speakers actually sound. As always, I'm going to use my tried and true audio test, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 on the Mega Drive, and really evokes those retro sounds I love so much and I really think just suit the whole vibe of the system. So let's see how that sounds at full volume. One thing I have to say about this handheld is it gets very loud. Much louder than I remember the Retroid Pocket 5 being. But for comparison, let's bring the Retroid Pocket 5 in, which, let's not forget, had pretty terrible sounding speakers when it reviewed. So I actually made a couple of videos on this channel about how you can improve the speaker quality. Now with a later update, we have that improved sound baked right into the handheld. So let's compare how the Retroid Pocket G2 sounds compared to the Retroid Pocket 5 with the new update with the improved sound quality. So what did you think about the audio differences? To me, the Retroid Pocket G2 sounded a little bit louder, but I think the Retroid Pocket 5 sounded a bit better. And I believe that's because I still have the James DSP enhancement turned on that I covered in my previous videos. So what I should probably do is install that on the Retroid Pocket G2 as well. But I haven't, and the reason I haven't is because I think this sounds pretty good already. The Retroid Pocket 5 sounded quite bad, to the point that I really wanted to install those enhancements and improve it. Whereas with the Retroid Pocket G2, I'm just perfectly happy with how it sounds, and even if I could get it to sound a bit better with some tweaking and fiddling around, I honestly just feel happy with how it is. You may also notice I put an overlay on the screen as well. That's because I like the look of the G2 in this yellow color so much, I've gone wild with customizing all of my bezels and overlays in all of my games. So as I play throughout some games today, you are going to see quite a lot of customization, more than I usually do. Of course, we don't need to use bezels because we have a lovely OLED screen, so if I was to turn this bezel off, we would get beautiful deep blacks on either side of the screen. But I personally just prefer the way bezels look. If I have an all black device, I like to keep everything black so it all disappears into the body, and that is why I recommend black handhelds, because the way the OLED just seamlessly blends into the all glass front panel, it just melts away, and I think it looks fantastic. But if you don't have an all black handheld, you have a nice colorful one like this, I prefer to use a bezel rather than just having nothing there. So by turning on the overlay like this, we now have a lovely bezel, and these ones are even animated. So as I push buttons on my handheld, they actually light up the little controller down there, which seems really pointless, but just makes me happy. So we've established that the screen is beautiful, it sounds loud and full, and I don't see a need to improve the sound quality, although of course we can try if we want to. The controls are good as well. So now let's talk about what games we can actually play on this thing. So of course we can play our old retro games. Mega Drive games like Sonic the Hedgehog are going to run absolutely perfectly here, upscaled to 1080p to match the screen. You're not going to see any kind of frame dips or have any performance issues. It's going to be beautiful for this. If you're more of a SNES fan, you're of course covered there as well. Once again, this overlay I've installed shows all of the buttons I press as I push the D-pad or the face buttons. They all animate beautifully. I couldn't possibly show off this beautiful yellow device without Pokemon Yellow. Taking down your rivals has never been more fun than this. Nice! We can relive those games from our childhood, like Game Gear games that were played on that massive, unwieldy, monstrous thing that required about 20 batteries to last about 5 minutes. I remember my mum getting so angry at me for using up all her batteries back then. But now we can play it on this nice, comfortable little pocket device that has great battery life, which I will talk about in a lot of detail soon. For anyone who's not familiar with this game, this is James Pond, Operation RoboCod. And this is an absolute classic. You just run around picking up things that make absolutely no sense whatsoever. If you need to get up somewhere high, you just extend your body like this. And whenever you're not doing anything, he just does a funky little dance. Truly one of the most lovable game characters of all time. My favorite games to play on any handheld are always Game Boy Advance games. And once again, of course, this device handles them absolutely perfectly, scaled up to match the full resolution of the screen. No problems whatsoever, so let's push it a little bit further. We can play some of our classic home consoles like the PlayStation 1, so I'm able to be Big Willie Johnson and engage in some fisticuffs. I don't seem to be doing too well, but I also seem to be invincible. Dreamcast is often the cutoff point for the slightly cheaper vertical handhelds like the Trim UI Brick and things like that, but runs absolutely flawlessly here. We have more than enough power to smash through Dreamcast, even upscaled as much as you want. PlayStation 2 is also going to have no problems getting 60 frames per second in at least most of the catalogue. There are a few PlayStation 2 games that plague almost any handheld, but for the most part you're going to be able to upscale at least 2 times or more for pretty much anything. Here I've put a 2 times upscale multiplier on this game. I'm sure we can actually go higher than this because even the Retroid Pocket 5 could go higher than this on this particular game, but I found that for me 2 times is a nice multiplier to just apply across the board for PlayStation 2, where I feel it looks pretty good on these small screens and shouldn't have any issues running lots of different games. So if you were looking to pick up a PlayStation 2 machine, I think the Retroid Pocket 5 was already very good at that, and here we have the same thing with even more power. PSP is also going to run absolutely beautiful here on a 4-time upscale up to 1080p. So if you were looking for a modern day PSP replacement, this would be a great option for that too. The more demanding PS Vita is also going to run pretty well on here as well, so if you want to play through the PlayStation Vita library, you can absolutely do that. PS3 emulation is still very immature on Android, but the few games that I tried to load up on here did all actually work. So it seems that we may soon have quite nice PlayStation 3 emulation, but it's not something you should expect to work. It's more just a bonus at this point. Now let's look at some dual screen gaming, because Retroid do of course sell a dual screen attachment for their devices. This is the Retroid Dual Screen, another screen exactly the same as the one in this, another 5.5-inch 1080p 60Hz OLED touchscreen. We can put the Retroid Pocket G2 into the little cradle here, and then elongate it around like this. There is then a cable that comes with the Retroid Dual Screen, which goes into the USB-C port of the Retroid Pocket G2, comes through these little channels here, and then has to flip up upside down into the dual screen itself, which looks a bit of a mess, but gives us a dual screen gaming experience. If you turn it on and you see that it's the wrong way round like this, that's because this is actually a portrait screen and we need to rotate it around. So just simply swipe down from the top of the screen and come to Settings, go down to Handheld Settings, Connect TV, and then at the bottom it's set to 1920 by 1080 TV. We need to change that from TV to RDS, Retroid Dual Screen. It will then tell you to unplug the cable and plug it back in again, and then it will show the right way around. Now to change the brightness of the two screens is a little bit annoying. I wish that they were synchronized, but as far as I'm aware, they're not. So you would change the brightness of your regular device just like normal, right here in the top-down panel, but that doesn't affect the Retroid Dual Screen. That actually has its own dedicated plus and minus buttons here, which you may think of a volume, but they are actually for the brightness of the dual screen attachment. So by touching those buttons, you can move the brightness up and down to somewhat match your other screen. We also have two angles to use it, the flat angle like this, or the slightly raised angle like that. For the sake of filming, I'm keeping it flat. So let's check out a few dual screen systems now, because this absolutely has the power to run two screens at once. So here we are in New Super Mario Bros. And it looks fantastic! Playing the game on the top screen and having the bottom screen showing where we are on the map. It's a nice experience and it doesn't actually feel too top heavy. I was quite worried about that when I picked it up, but it actually feels pretty nice. Now I'm sure the AYN Thor would feel even better, but for some quick two-screen gaming in a pinch, this is wonderful. So now let's look at a more demanding two-screen system. Here we are in some 3DS gaming. Mario Kart 7 with the main game on the top screen and the map on the bottom screen. Once again, it looks fantastic and it's so nice to have these dual screens working together. I think Retroid have done a great job with this accessory. And it just works so seamlessly. So let's move on to now an even more demanding dual screen gaming experience. Here is the Wind Waker HD, using a special build of Cemu which enables two-screen support. So I have the game playing at the top, and at the bottom I have the gamepad. So this would be like playing the Wii U on the TV with the Wii U handheld gamepad in your hands. This is quite experimental and it actually just crashed when I was trying to show it. So this is definitely not something that's even been released yet, but it does show potentially the future of what we're working with here, with a dual screen attachment or something like the AYN Thor and a powerful handheld. For all of the games I've showed so far, we've been in the standard performance profile with the fan turned off, and the device is not getting hot whatsoever. But now we're going to get into the more demanding games, so we're going to want to bump up the performance profile, which I found does make a big difference when playing demanding games. So we're going to shift performance mode from standard to high performance, which will force us to use the fan now. I'm going to put the fan onto smart mode, but I found that with this device, even on smart mode, it does get quite noisy, as we now try to play some more demanding systems. I'm also going to disconnect the dual screen for now, as the dual screen showcase is over. But let's now jump into some more single screen systems that will be the most demanding we can throw at this thing. This is Ever After Falls on the Nintendo Switch, a really cute, beautiful game, and it's going to have no problems running at a solid 60 frames per second here on the Retroid Pocket G2. If you're playing a game like this, it's easily going to handle it, even playing multiplayer. The Retroid Pocket 5 also could handle this game well, but really fell down when trying to play multiplayer. The added power of the G2 here will allow us to play multiplayer with no issues. So if you'd like to play simple little Switch games like this, you're going to run them at 60 frames per second, even here at 1080p, with no issues. And actually almost the entire Switch library will be playable here on the Retroid Pocket G2. Little Prince Boy, Exhale of the Crazy, is also going to run pretty nicely at a solid 30 frames per second. This of course is a 30 frame per second game, so running it at a 30 frames per second means we are running it at full speed 1080p. As you get further into the game, it's possible that the frames might drop a little bit more, but at least here in the opening area, looking around at the vast open landscape, we are not dropping below 30 frames per second. And in fact, we can even get quite a bit higher than this, as you'll see in my shootout video I made with lots of different handhelds. Because thankfully, the Retroid Pocket G2 does support turnip drivers, which greatly help with compatibility and performance in Switch games. Even Little Prince Boy Cries of the Monarchy is quite playable here. It does make the Retroid Pocket G2 sound like a jet engine, but it is mostly playable and getting 30 frames per second once shaders have compiled. There is the black texture glitching happening here, but that is not unique to this device. That happens on many devices and has done for a long time. The performance is pretty good. Once again, as you get further into the game, you might see that drop down quite a bit. But to have this 30 frames per second even at the beginning here is really impressive when we consider that the Retroid Pocket 5 just couldn't get close to playing this game, at least in any of my tests. So I'm really impressed with this. The same size and shell as the Retroid Pocket 5, but with a noticeably huge improvement in performance. We can also play Windows games here. This is Game Hub and this is Monster Boy and the Cursed Kingdom, a very cute little game. One that I think looks absolutely beautiful here, whether it's 1080p or here at 720p, it always looks great. And I will be using this as part of my battery life test coming up soon in the video. There's no issues getting around 60 frames per second in this game. It runs smooth and delightfully. And we can play more demanding games like Grand Theft Auto 5 here, still getting a pretty respectable frame rate of around 50 frames per second, which looks great at 720p. Driving around the city nice and smoothly, it feels and looks really good. To be able to play something like this in such a tiny, sleek form factor, I think it's great. The only real downside right now is that fan is very loud. So I just showed you a lot of games and a lot of systems that run really nicely, but what about the ones that don't run that well? So this is a new chip inside here, the Snapdragon G2 Gen 2. It's brand new and as far as I know is only in this one device right now. And because it's so new, it has some teething problems. It's not perfectly compatible across the board like an older, more mature chip like the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 in the Odin 2 line of handhelds and that will be in the upcoming Retroid Pocket 6. So if we take Dolphin for example, Gamecube emulation, a game like The Simpsons Hit and Run runs absolutely beautifully here, much better than my driving. But there's a very common glitch inside Dolphin. If you've got very good eyesight, you might be able to see it. There's something actually isn't quite right about this golf course. It's of course the completely purple grass and black lakes. There are texture issues in Dolphin with a lot of new chips. We've seen this with the Odin 3, with the G2 Gen 2 here, and various other modern chips. Thankfully there is an easy fix for this. Because the G2 Gen 2 does have turnip driver support, we can just come to the settings, graphic settings, GPU driver, and install a driver. You really can use any driver you like. I'll pick my tried and true absolute favorite 9v2 driver, which is great on the Retroid Pocket 5. It's not necessarily the best driver for this device, but for GameCube emulation, it really doesn't matter too much. We just need something to fix those textures. And then back in the settings menu, we also need to change the video backend to Vulkan. You can do this for the whole application, or you could just do that for one specific game by holding down on that game and coming to the game settings. I like to just change it for the whole application, so by changing it to Vulkan and adding a graphics driver, that should now fix any of those graphical issues. So if we load up that save file again, you'll see the purple appear just for a second, and then it will be fixed. And then you are free to play your favorite GameCube games badly, but without any graphical issues. This is a European game, so it does run at 50 frames per second maximum. And as you can see, we have no issues hitting 50 frames per second here. So this is also a nice little GameCube machine. It just might take a little bit of tweaking to fix those initial problems. But there are unfortunately a few things that just cannot be fixed right now. The first one's Netflix. Right now, Netflix is not compatible with this device. Now you might be thinking that's not a big deal because you're not going to watch videos on this anyway. But the reason that is a bigger deal is it means we don't have access to Netflix games. And they have some great games in their library. They've got a couple of Grand Theft Auto games, and they've got the new Red Dead Redemption port coming out as well. So to miss out on those for now is a shame, and I hope this does get unlocked soon, because the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 chip that's going to be in the Retroid Pocket 6 can play them absolutely fine. So this is one advantage of going for the Retroid Pocket 6, assuming we don't get support soon. Another game we're not going to have access to is Fortnite. We can install the Epic Games Store just fine on the Retroid Pocket G2, but if we try to download Fortnite, we're going to get a message, unable to install game, saying we need Android 10 or higher, which we have, we need an internet connection, which we have, and we have all of these minimum specs, but it just doesn't seem to be registering properly. Epic Games might be confusing the G2 Gen 2's Adreno A220 chip with the older Adreno 220 chip. Or more likely, it just has absolutely no idea what it is, so it unfortunately just cannot install. This is a real shame. Now I would be curious to see if we could extract this APK from another handheld and put it on here, but as far as just downloading it from the store, right now it does not work. 8 Gen 2 here in the Odin 2 portal that will be in the Retroid Pocket 6 not only launches the game fine, but supports 120 frames per second as well. So if you are looking to play Fortnite, the Retroid Pocket 6 is definitely going to be a better option than the Retroid Pocket G2, because not only is it going to be supported right out of the box, but it's going to support that 120Hz screen as well. So performance here in general is absolutely fantastic, noticeably better than the Retroid Pocket 5, and we're able to play almost anything you could possibly want to on something this small. But how is the battery life when doing so? Let's look at a couple of charts I put together. First of all, let's see how long the Retroid Pocket G2 lasts when playing different kinds of games. Tears of the Kingdom on Switch and GTA 5 on GameHub both run for about 2 hours. In both cases, the Retroid Pocket G2 was set to high performance with the fan on sport mode to make sure it had enough power to give us a consistent frame rate. Tears of the Kingdom was running at 1080p and GTA 5 was running at 720p, and they had very similar runtimes here. 2 hours 4 minutes for GTA 5, 2 hours 7 minutes for Tears of the Kingdom. I then tried some lighter games to see how much battery we could get with the performance turned down to standard and the fan turned off. Monster Boy and the Cursed Kingdom on GameHub at 720p ran for 3 hours and 29 minutes before the Retroid Pocket G2 turned off. A light Switch game, Ever After Falls at 1080p, ran for 6 hours and 14 minutes. Very impressive for some light Switch gaming. So if you were going to play some light Switch games on here, you could expect a good few hours of battery life, which is very encouraging. So let's now see how much battery we could really get out of this by playing something super light. Pokemon Yellow on Game Boy, running in RetroArch, at a 6-time upscale, run for over 18 hours. So you can definitely get a really long battery life if you're playing light games like this. So then how long does it take to charge this back up? Well, if we connect my battery here and look at just a very simple battery analysis here, you can see we're charging at around 23 watts. But let's look in some more detail. I will connect my USB-C power meter here so we can get some very in-depth information. You're going to see all kinds of things flying across the screen here, but we're only going to focus on 2 things today to keep it nice and simple. So first of all, let's focus on the protocol here. Power delivery 3.0, 27 watts. That is what the Retroid Pocket G2 is asking for from our power adapter. That is totally standard for any kind of handheld or phone like this. Something relatively powerful but mobile will usually charge at 27 watts or thereabouts. But here in the blue box is the amount of power we're actually taking into the Retroid Pocket G2 from the power bank. And you can see right now it's at 18 watts. Now this will vary throughout the charging percentage of the device. So I've put together this little chart to show how the power draw changes as it charges. You can see when it's at 0%, it's charging basically at full speed, 25 watts, taking almost entirely all of the power it can from the charger. And then as we gain more charge into the battery, it begins to slow down. We're able to charge from 0% to 80% in 49 minutes, at which point it's gone from 25 watts of power draw down to 12. We're then able to get up to 90% in 60 minutes. So 1 hour will get you from 0% charge to 90%. But here it starts to really slow down. And once we get to 95% battery, this protocol actually changes from power delivery 3.0 27 watts down to 5 watts, and it trickles along up to 100%. And I found that when the Retroid Pocket G2's battery up here hits 98%, it really slows down. And once it hits 99%, it seems to linger there forever. It doesn't like hitting 100%. So we went from 0% to 90 in 60 minutes, but to go from 90 to 100 took 34 minutes. It really slows down over time, but that is good for protecting the battery. So I think this charges pretty nicely, and if you're only charging to 80 or 90% rather than a full charge, which also is quite good for preserving a battery, you're going to be able to do that in an hour or less. So pretty good there. Another area we should look at are the thermals, because this gets quite toasty, noticeably warmer than my other handhelds. Now, it's not uncomfortably hot by any means, but it does feel pretty warm in the hands, and that fan does go quite wild. So I'm going to run the Wildlife Extreme benchmarking app, which should really push the device to its limit. So these devices are all running the Wildlife Extreme test right now, and we're going to see how hot they're getting on the back and if the fans are helping them to cool down. Using my thermal imaging camera, you can see the hottest thing on the table right now is the Retroid Pocket G2 in the middle there at around 40 degrees, sometimes going up to 41. Now if we isolate each handheld one by drawing a little rectangle around them, you can see the hottest point on the Odin 2 Portal is only 24 degrees. The hottest point on the Retroid Pocket 5 is 34 degrees, right up where those vents are at the top. And yes, unfortunately, the hottest point on the Retroid Pocket G2 is now getting up to 42 degrees, and it keeps on rising. So yes, the Retroid Pocket G2 is noticeably warmer than the others. It's not uncomfortably warm, but it is a little bit warm, and it's just something to be aware of. So let's now talk about accessories. As I said earlier in the video when looking around the device, this USB-C port can be used for video output. So you can connect this to a dock like the one that Retroid sell on their website, or any other kind of dock you can use for devices like Steam Decks or anything similar. If you have a USB-C supported monitor like this portable monitor I have here from UPerfect, which I featured in a video before, you can simply just connect it to power and then just use a USB-C to USB-C cable directly into the Retroid Pocket G2, and it will just work right away. Now you might notice it's flipped around. Just like how I said earlier when I covered the dual screen attachment, we need to go into the handheld settings and make a little change. So let's come down to handheld settings, connect TV, and now where it says RDS, which I set up earlier for that Retroid dual screen, we need to change it back to TV. Unplug the cable, plug it back in again, and then it will be set up to be 16:9 landscape orientation for our external TV. We can also then choose if we want to turn off the handheld screen when connected to a TV like this, but for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm just going to keep it turned on so I can see what I'm doing. Then, of course, you can go and play all your games just like you normally would on a monitor or a TV. So I could connect a Bluetooth controller like the Absolute M4, which I featured recently on the channel, and I can just play my games on the TV like this. So I absolutely recommend getting some kind of dock setup, whether it's just a simple USB-C to C cable if your monitor supports it, or any kind of generic dock you could get from Amazon or AliExpress. Most of them will work. Just check that they support 60 frames per second, at least at 1080p, and then you're going to have a nice experience. There are a lot of them out there that only support 30 Hertz, a lot of the really cheap ones, so just make sure it at least gives you a nice smooth 60 frames per second and you'll be having fun gaming like this. We of course have the fantastic Retroid dual screen attachment we covered earlier in the video, which works really well with DS, 3DS, Wii U. There's even modified PSP emulators that work with this too. So I'm able to watch Ryan Retro videos while I play my games at the same time. Absolutely fantastic. And as the Retroid Pocket G2 shares the complete same shell as the Retroid Pocket 5, all the same accessories are usable on the G2. So if you already had a Retroid Pocket 5 and had some accessories like the official grip case, for example, you're able to just reuse that with your Retroid Pocket G2 and make a nice bumblebee color combination. Or if you're like me and you 3D printed your own custom case for your Retroid Pocket 5, that's of course going to fit in completely perfectly as well, and you're good to go. So if you're someone who's already invested in the Retroid Pocket 5, you've bought accessories, you've bought all kinds of things for it, maybe custom buttons, custom sticks, all these kinds of goodies, and you want to upgrade the power, this could be an enticing option to just upgrade the chip inside to play more demanding games while still keeping all the things you've already bought. But is the Retroid Pocket G2 worth it when the Retroid Pocket 6 is coming out soon for a very similar price? In my opinion, if you're someone who's happy enough with what you're getting here and you want something quickly, there's no big problem with going for this. It's a great handheld. But if you're someone who does want the best for your money and you're willing to wait a little bit, the Retroid Pocket 6 is coming next month, and for about the same price, you do get some good upgrades. You get a more mature chip that's pretty much the same but a little bit more powerful. The screen goes from 60 Hz to 120, which I think is the biggest upgrade. The output goes from 1080p to 4K, which is also fantastic for docking. The ergonomic bumps have been made bigger, so it should be more comfortable and maybe fix my problem with the gap between my fingers. And the D-pad and analog sticks can be switched if you want them to. Or if you want to keep them as they are here, you can also do that as well. So in my opinion, if you're willing to wait a little bit, I would recommend skipping this and going for the Retroid Pocket 6. I think it's going to be the better handheld overall. But if you're someone who doesn't care about the extra 60 Hz or the 4K, you don't care about the ergonomic grips, and you're more than happy with the D-pad on top, then there's no real problem going for this. I've seen some people calling this device a disgrace and all kinds of things like that, when realistically it's a good handheld. It takes everything I loved about the Retroid Pocket 5 and just makes it more powerful for the same price. This was $219 for almost a year straight. This is coming in at $219 as well, but with a much more powerful chip. So I think this is also a good option, especially if you want something before Christmas, but if you're willing to wait a little bit, go for the Retroid Pocket 6 instead. That is my advice to you. I'll be covering the Retroid Pocket 6 in great detail when I receive it, hopefully next month, and I will be putting them together in more shootouts, so be prepared for those. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please let me know what you think about the G2 in the comments below. It's been quite a controversial handheld because of the impending Retroid Pocket 6, but I think if you take everything out of the equation and just look at the Retroid Pocket G2 for what it is an excellent handheld. I really enjoy it, and I think a lot of people will too. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you have a lovely day, and I'll see you again in the next one. Bye.